Dear colleagues, thank you for joining us for this webinar. Today, we're going to explore the costs and the benefits of using digital technology for elections in Africa. I think this is a very timely topic, given that most African countries are since last year and this year have been wanting to have elections or are scheduled to have elections or already had elections, and therefore have been exploring the issue of technology to assist in the election process. So,
recording in progress.
Just give me a minute. So yes, as I was saying, in the recent years, the adoption of digital technology in electoral processes has gained momentum across Africa. Countries have increasingly turned to digital solutions to enhance the efficiency, the transparency, and the credibility of elections. Technologies such as biometric voter registration, electronic voting, and digital platforms for voter education, as well as election monitoring, have been implemented in with various degrees of success. However, the use of digital technology in elections also raises concerns, including financial costs, the risk of cybersecurity or cybersecurity risks, and the potential of disenfranchisement. So we're going to explore how African countries continue to implement digital technologies in their electoral processes. And it's important for us to assess the cost and the benefits to ensure that innovations contribute positively to the democratic process. So in this webinar, we aim to bring together, or we have brought experts, policymakers, and stakeholders to discuss the impact of digital technology on elections in Africa, weighing its advantages against the challenges it presents. So I welcome you all to this session. Thank you for making the time to join us. And thank you too for your patience. We had a challenge with the timings, but we are all here and are grateful that you have joined us. So my name is Mwenda Njiraini. I'm the African Initiative Coordinator at DiploFoundation, and I invite you to this webinar very warmly and ask that you ask as many questions as you can from to the panelists who are distinguished panelists who have joined us today. So feel free to ask questions. You can type them on the chat, and then we can proceed from there. So now I'd like to invite the moderator of this session, Dr. Catherine Gitao, who is going to guide us. And before she comes in, I would like to introduce our panelists and so among our panelists are Ibrahim Lawal Ahmed. Mr. Ibrahim is a senior research officer and personal assistant to the founder and chairman of Savannah Center for Diplomacy, Democracy and Development, an Abuja-based NGO and think tank with a track record of research, advocacy, training, and program execution on foreign policy, peace and security, and good governance. He was a special assistant on development policy to the immediate past president of Nigeria, Muhammad Buhari, where he was involved in policy making, policy coordination on matters related to agriculture and food security, water resources, education, science and technology, labor and industrial actions, bilateral economic relations, and police reform. His research interests are in areas of political economy, philosophy, history, and international relations. He's grounded in political science, administration, and development policy. So welcome very much, Mr. Ibrahim.
Thank you.
Then we have James. James is an expert in artificial intelligence. He has a doctorate in artificial intelligence and machine learning, a master's degree in artificial intelligence and machine learning, a master's in financial engineering, is a Google certified data engineer, and an AI machine learning mentor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, University of Texas in Austin, Deakin University, Australia. Is a data science expert at Kaggle, Google, which is a Google AI and experimental platform for data scientists, and he works around issues to do with market models, fintech, economic models, governance and policy models, health models, and educational models. So thank you and welcome, James. Then we have Dr. Scott Tim Key. Dr. Scott Kimti is a PhD from Simon Fraser University. Is a senior research associate at the Research ICT Africa, where he oversees information integrity program. He's also affiliated to the Center of Information Technology and Public Life at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. His third book, which is The Political Economy of Fortune and Misfortune, Prospects of Prosperity in Our Times, was released in March 2023. Welcome, Dr. Scott.
Thank you very much for your warm greeting.
Yes, then we have Willis Onyango. Willis Onyango represents the youth wherever he goes. So Willis Onyango is the executive director of the Youth Cafe, an award-winning Pan-African youth association based in Kenya. He's a visionary leader, passionate about social justice and dedicated to create opportunities funds and entrepreneurship management fee, and a bachelor's in international diplomacy. He's also completed the Civic Leadership Institute. He's also completed the Civic Leadership Institute at Kansas State University as part of President Barack Obama's Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders. Mr. Onyango is an author of is the author of the Kenya Youth Manifesto, a nonpartisan publication that unified the aspirations of Kenya youth. He's also published. He's also a published columnist for several prominent news outlets, including the Star newspaper, the Standard newspaper, and Huffington Post, and Open Democracy and the World Economic Forum. He's born and raised in Kenya, and his passion for youth development stems from his experience growing up in a disadvantaged community. He's committed to ensuring that young people have access to resources that they need to succeed. Willis currently serves on the board of the Global Fund for Children and other local and international boards. So welcome, Mr. Willis. Finally, we have Eliud Kibi. Eliud is an accredited journalist by the Media Council of Kenya, a political, international, and diplomacy writer, analyst, and editor with close to 10 years experience in print and digital media. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in International Relations and Diplomacy from the Technical University of Kenya in Nairobi, and a master's degree in International Relations from the China Foreign Affairs University in Beijing. Is a certified public accountant, Section 2 certification, and is a Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue 2022 fellow. Welcome, Eliud. So with that, I think we have finished the introductions. Yeah, thank you so much, all the panelists for joining us. I can now ask Dr. Catherine Yetiawo to take over. Thank you very much.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our distinguished panelists and also to each and every guest who has logged on to this webinar. We're very excited to talk about this topic, which I think is very, very pertinent towards democracy in the future, and to have a wide range of panelists who have technical backgrounds, governance backgrounds, communication, and academics. So I believe we're going to get a very, very rounded view of how this technology can transform voting and democracy in Africa. So I'd kindly ask everyone who is not speaking to, as usual, mute their mics. We may have an issue later because Kenya has become extremely wet during this season. So if you do see the quality of the connection deteriorating, you can just use the audio and switch off the video to reduce the bandwidth required. Otherwise, I'll just get into it. The panelists will have around 50 minutes. And then after that, we can interact with the audience. And please put your questions in the chat. And I would also kindly ask each panelist to occasionally look at the chat and see if there are any questions of interest. So without much further ado, I'll invite our panelists, beginning with Ibrahim, to tell us a little bit about what you have observed about electronic voting around Africa, especially in any region where you may have intimate knowledge, and give us an idea of what the benefits are and what could some of the costs or some of the risks or things that have actually happened, just to set us off on this journey. Ibrahim, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you, everyone. My name is Ibrahim, as she stated, so I'm based in Nigeria. And to me, you have asked a very good question for me to speak about what I observe with electronic voting. And I'll start with, should I say a story or, yeah, a reflection. So in a state in Nigeria, I won't mention the name of the state, in 2019, the governor of the state, for the first time in Nigeria, introduced an electronic voting machine in the local government election. That's the first time in Nigeria. There are many processes, of election, registration, accreditation. So in Nigeria, usually registration and accreditation are electronic, but the voting is usually paper, manual. But that governor, for the first time in 2019, actually 2018, introduced that. And what did I observe? First, it addressed the issue about invalid vote. So there is no invalid vote. However, there was an error, very terrible error with that machine, which is if you can just keep clicking a particular party, and no matter how much you as a person click, it will just keep counting. So it's like it's like a counter. That's what the machine is. It doesn't have any sophistication to kind of restrict the person that will do the clicking, which is very, very important, in securing the election. So that's something that comes to my mind right now. And it brings out it brings out a weakness, because the essence of technology is to address a problem. That's the essence of technology, whether that technology is digital or not digital. And particularly and especially, the essence of digital technology is really to address the modern society problem. There's a saying that if you are faced with a problem in this modern day, digitize it. So by digitizing the button, if I look at it from that way, because not much attention probably has been put, not much policy reflection has been put, there was a fundamental weakness, a flaw in the tool, which instead of solving the problem, it compounded the problem. So this point out that the issue about election, 3 pillars are very important: the people, the process, and the technology itself. They have to tally, and there has to be balance among these 3 processes. I will maybe speak much more about that when the discussion continues. But let me also touch about another issue of technology. One of the complaints about election, probably everywhere in Africa, but in Nigeria is very, very particular, is rigging the election, electoral rigging. Usually the opposition or any party that loses the election never believes that it loses free and fair. It believes that there was some malpractice. So the advocacy about introducing digital technology in the process of election, whether in accreditation, with the political party registration, is driven most about to address that rigging, to minimize it. So in Nigeria, the kind of first breakthrough in terms of technology started in 2011 with the introduction of a smart card reader, I think, whereby you have to be verified, accredited electronically, and that is saved in the server of the electoral management body, and then you vote. Therefore, only the number of voters will tally with the number of accredited people or accredited voters. So you cannot try to manipulate to have a number of ballot bots more than the number of accredited people or people that came to vote. So that's when it started. We used it in 2011, in 2015. And then we use it, it was improved DPAD in around 2019. And then in 2021, there was this bimodal voter accreditation system that was introduced. And the technology is that it is used to register a voter, one. Then during voting, it is used to accredit a voter, and then it is used to transmit results to the portal of the electoral management body in Nigeria. Now, in 2023, we tried to deepen the involvement of digital technology in Nigeria. And there was a lot of advocacy whereby the idea was the voting will be transmitted in real time. But now, let me talk that this is why the issue is. This is why the problem is for the government, because there's a lot of advocates for that. The budget presented by the electoral management body to not only to national, in fact, they presented to president. They wanted an intervention, a presidential intervention, which is quite beyond their budget. Is that they need 117,379,778,217 naira, which is equivalent to approximately $255 million for the technology. $255 million. The entire budget for conducting the election is around $772 million. Just for the technology part, it is taking 117 billion. That's a very huge sum. Not all of that sum was released by the government, but a huge sum was released by the government. But unfortunately, we will say, yes, there was accreditation using technology valid. But the problem of that achieving real-time transmission of button was not. And why? Why? I trace another problem. Because of a significant level of hacking. The level of hacking was, I think, during the general election, if I remember, in a few hours, the electoral management body was attacked more than 1,000 times. I think it collapsed. During the 2023 general election, I think about 4,000 plus attack on the server portal of the electoral management body in Nigeria was recorded. And this point out to a lot of my problems. First, from my so far what I've said, yes, indeed, technology can solve the problem of the election we are facing, particularly in terms of addressing valid bots, that your bot count. But however, it comes at a huge financial cost. It also requires, in terms of identifying the technology, that it also requires a lot of careful scrutiny to choose the right technology for the right environment, because even in terms of sophistication, the knowledge, how literate are the people is another issue. So the technology to be chosen, it requires a lot of scrutiny. And third, which is a very, very important thing, is that it has to be the process of digitization, the electoral process, and the involvement of the technology. We have to watch out for threat of cyber attacks. It happens, and it can completely disrupt the whole election. So I will stop here and listen to my other colleagues about their observation. I hope I say something. Thank you. Back to you, Ma.
Yes, thank you so much, Ibrahim. You've shown us some very practical benefits in terms of voter registration and people not being able to vote twice, but they can double click, and also the risks and the financial costs. So I'll move on to Scott now, because of course we admire the US as one of the most developed countries in the world. And we'd like to hear your experience. I know there's a level of automation in the US election, but there are also some things that remain manual. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how things are done there, and also what have been the observed risks and benefits of the technology.
Great. Thank you very much. So just before I jump into answering the substance of that question, I just wanted to say that the remarks that I'm making today are also building upon some of the work that my colleagues and I have done over the last 2 or 3 years at Research ICT Africa. So there are others such as Zara Schrodinger, Guy Berger, Liz Arembo, and Hanani Khlamini, who also very important collaborators in developing some of the perspectives that I'm going to bring today. I think it's very valuable that we start with some questions of principles and sort of the African endorsement of elections. The Declaration on the Principles Governing Democratic Elections in Africa, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and the Guidelines on Access to Information in Elections in Africa demonstrate that there's strong African commitments to fair elections, and that these represent the cornerstone of democratic governance, serving as junctures where democratic practices are tested and reinforced. There's some other matters that we also need to put on the table, and that's around what does a credible, fair election require? And so there are numerous components to this, but the four elementary particles, or the four elementary elements, involve universal adult suffrage, equal voter weighting, representative institutions, and freedom from state interference in political expression. These are core fundamental democratic principles, whether it be electoral competition, political legitimacy through public participation, equality of citizenship, and peaceful transition of power. So whenever we start to look at any technological intervention, whether it be AI or biometrics or anything else for that matter, these are ultimately the criteria that it needs to be assessed against. How does it help ensure greater electoral competition? How does it help ensure further public participation? Does it help with legitimizing transfers of power? Is there a way that it can limit or buffer state coercion? Now, more broadly, looking at the landscape in the global north, we see that there are established institutions that have decades of experience working and managing electoral processes. To me, the key element over here is recognizing that democracy is a learned practice, that it's something that states, a society becomes better at the more often that they participate, the more often they hold elections. So when you start to incorporate technology into those electoral processes, they already come with a groundswell of institutional knowledge and a consolidated institutional practice. Now, we know that Africa has emerged out of the despotic era, out of state authoritarianism in the 80s, 90s, and the like, coming out of Cold War politics. And there are many societies on the continent that are still learning their practice when it comes to democracy. I don't think we should view these as failed democratic aspirations, but more that we need to have reasonable expectations about how institutions are learning to conduct legitimate elections. And while technology may be useful to help with that practice, ultimately it's our institutional strength that is going to help determine our election integrity. I'm going to say one last other thing before passing the baton back to my panelists, and that is we can't necessarily take a view that the relationship between AI and democratic outcomes is straightforward. It's a complicated, multifaceted approach, but ultimately it is overdetermined by complex social, historical, political processes. So we cannot imagine for a moment that AI is going to solve social divisions or that we can have a technological solution to fundamental political questions. There are certainly ways in which technology can help intervene to try clarify stakes, to help provide fairer mechanisms, but ultimately we need to be attentive to history and institutional development. Unless technology is understood from within this paradigm, ultimately most of our technological interventions will likely fail. Thank you very much, and I'm going to pass the baton back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott, for keeping us grounded that the technology has to meet the same requirements of democracy and successful elections. That helps us have a measure of what technology must maintain and achieve. I'll now move to Willis. In Kenya, we're very careful of our Gen Zs. So Willis, your generation are really tech savvy, and they're really very, very frequent users of technology.
Dr. Gitau?
Yes?
Sorry to interrupt. We don't have Willis in the room at the moment. Yeah.
Oh, he's dropped out.
No, he hasn't logged in yet.
Oh, okay. So let me then quickly move to Elliot, who may be able to guide us on the same issues. So Eliud, really the same question. We've seen how vibrant the Gen Zs have been on the space of social media and their interest in civic affairs, which I think is exemplary. Give us some idea of how you think that voting electronically or electronic processes would either include or exclude our youth, or empower them or disempower them. How do you see the youth interacting with electronic technology in the voting space?
Thank you for the opportunity. So yes, I think there's two ways to look at it. Looking at how technology is actually used in the Kenyan election. So essentially, we are not fully, on board electronically, because so far where technology is applied is, in voter registration through the biometric voter registration, platform, as well as, voter identification. This is where, you use the facial, the fingerprint, or your ID number to identify yourself as a voter at the polling station. And where it's, partially, electronic is the transmission of, the results from the polling station. And all these, processes have a backup, a manual backup, because if the electronic or the BVR is not able to identify you, then the clerk has to revert back to the manual voter register, which is used as a backup. Now, looking at that context is, of course, we have seen, and I was looking at the report by the US Congress, that in the past we have not seen the youth very enthusiastic with political processes, one of being elections. And most of them, if you go around, they will say they do not vote. The reason is maybe there's no interest, or they don't have a candidate to vote. But then since the Gen Z protest, or the Gen Z revolution of 24 June, there's a lot of active political activeness among the youth, and we are seeing this a lot through social media platforms. We also see a lot of that in the mainstream media, where there's a group of young people who are coalescing and becoming very critical in the decision that the political players historically, who have been there for a long time, are considering as they prepare for the elections of 2027. So to now respond that, I think then expanding that space and allowing them to participate electronical, or using the technological platforms that are available, then you would see a lot of engagements. But then there's a disadvantage towards this, because technology comes with other supporting infrastructure. One of these is internet, for example. And for you to use internet, of course, most of it then needs to come with power. Even if you store power for a short, for a period, then the capturing of the so many other areas outside the urban areas, then we would see some exclusion of young people who would like to participate electronically. So to answer your question, yes, they could see a lot of engagement from the youth, because of course, and I'm not saying that it would sort of exclude so many of them, but we are aware that, for example, we have used deployed technology in the last 3 elections. One of the biggest issues was connectivity in some parts, far-flung areas of the country, the northeastern part, the northern part, as well as the coast areas and other rural areas. So when those systems failed, then there was the questions of the integrity of the election. So I think the downward of it is the supporting infrastructure of technological value, which is not spread equally across the country. Yes.
Thank you very much, Eliud, for bringing in that practical element, that there's supporting infrastructure for energy, which may lead to exclusion depending on where people live. I'll probably follow up later with the idea of voter registration. And I think the youth often complain that they are not able to get the ID cards, or the registration is somehow hampered. But for now, let me turn to James. And I guess that James was my mentor and my instructor when I was in school, even though I look much older than him. So I'm very appreciative of James. James, you'll handle two issues for us. One of them is the issue of data, because I can see you have a lot of qualifications and experience in that area. So probably voter registration is one of the largest registration of adults in any country. And the handling of that data, I think, can be quite explosive, especially since it's linked with a very sensitive process. So you'll tell us a little bit about, what you think about how that data could be handled, especially as it moves to the electronic space. The second thing is how emerging technology can assist us. I have a lot of hope for AI and all the emerging technology as being a way of mitigating the risks of voting and meeting the criteria that Scott talked about. Am I being naive? Do you see emerging technology as a boon or a bane for voting in future? Thank you, James.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. So those are very good questions. And I'm going to state this. Digital technology being used in any form of election in anywhere in the world, not just even Africa, it is a tremendous undertaking, just like you said, and for countries that make such attempts, we should kind of give them some respite. We should give them some accolades, because it is usually a very big undertaking. So that said, generally there are always three parts. There's a part of what happens pre-election. There's also the part of what happened during election. And so there's also the part of what happened post-election. And then for most African countries, it seems there's always been a lot of success on pre, and then maybe little itches during election when equipment start failing and all. But I know the first question you asked is around the handling of data, which is like something happening during pre-election, and then at the point of transmission. So I'm going to answer all those. And then I'm also going to make some references to, I'm actually quite adept at the electioneering in Nigeria. This Ghana in this 2024 election, I was part of the team that assisted. And also to some extent, I was also part of the research team that worked also on the American election. So there's always a lot of peculiarities with African elections. And more so, I like the fact that Eliud mentioned something about infrastructure. And that is the truth. For instance, Estonia is being lauded as like the pioneer of digital election in the whole world. But the question people miss is always, so what's the population of Estonia? They are less than 2 million. And then so it is always easy to deploy technology at scale, achieve interesting results. A lot of African countries, maybe Nigeria, for instance, trying to deploy similar technology to tackle electioneering need of, say, like 96, it comes with a lot of responsibility. So there's also the need for the process needs to be hybrid, more because the infrastructure is not yet there. So you need to allow for digital and then manual handling of the data. And I'm going to repeat that, the digital and the manual handling of the data. And just like Eliud also mentioned, there needs to be like a backup. So what about if digital fails, considering the fact that there's not a robust digital infrastructure to handle the undertaking? So you need to be able to fall back to the digital. Of course, the concern is always like each of the countries is their data protection law, there was something I'm actually aware of. For instance, I think it was in 2011, the data of almost all the participants of Nigerian election was actually leaked online. So it is something you could buy, and that is bad. I'm happy there's a tremendous progress from 2011 till now. Now you can't get it anymore online, which is good. So country first needs to start with having very good, solid data protection law? How do you undo this? So you create a framework, and then you let your electioneering agencies to key into that. That way there will be success. Also, with respect to emerging technology, interesting thing is like election and use of digital technology in election is all about trust building. And I'm going to be sincere with you. This is my domain where I deploy a lot of AI tools. I try to attend to needs of government agencies and, at scale. Digital technology application is a lot about trust. A country can spend a lot of money, but if the people don't trust the processes, it becomes a waste. So countries first need to build trust. They need to trust the process. When they trust the process, any use or application of digital technology, would then be embraced such that the cost justifies the means. So like Ibrahim mentioned something about Nigerian spending and budgeting around $700 million for the last election. That was the truth. But then, of course, there was a lot of enthusiasm. The Nigerian election succeeded tremendously on the pre-election. It succeeded during electioneering. At least it solved the problem. No one can go to polling units, carry a ballot box and start running away with it. It was pointless. But then where it failed was transmission. And for me, as a researcher, it is a plus. There are like 3 points of failure. At least this time around, there's one. So that represents progress. So countries should not be afraid to embrace digital technology. There will be mishaps, there will be failure, but it represents progress. I know, for instance, so the last part about the emerging tech will be the use of blockchain to be able to tackle a whole lot of the issues around hacking and transmission and cybersecurity issues, which is also an issue faced by almost every country that wants to go digital. Brazil faced it. Estonia, that is Eponia, also faced it. So blockchain will effectively help in tackling a whole lot of such. But then it comes with also building trust. The use of AI too can effectively help in tackling the cyber attacks, but you must be aware of the fact that this comes at a cost. The cost is that countries must not try preparing for election a year to it. You need to start preparing like maybe 4 years. It needs to be a continuous process. And I will also make reference to this. So something that also happened in Nigerian election was the Nigerian team were too ambitious. They were trying to achieve so much within the space of a year and a half. Tackling pre-election, tackle post-election, tackle during electioneering, but then without accounting effectively for that, there can be a fault somewhere, which is through that transmission. So at the end of the day, when deploying and appreciating emerging tech, it needs to be continuous. It shouldn't be something you try deploying a year to election. There's going to be failure. So that continuous deployment, to tackle the scale problem is what I believe a whole lot of countries should adopt.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, and of course the scale is massive. I can imagine in a country like Nigeria that handling, more than 100 million records in real time cannot be easy. Now, I love the word trust because I think whether the elections are manual or electronic, having each citizen believe that their vote counted and having each citizen believe that the result that has been transmitted is the correct one lies at the heart of a successful election. So I'll go back to Scott and then I'll follow with Ibrahim on this issue of trust. And ask maybe I don't know whether it's a simple or a complex question, that do you think that digital technology is increasing the level of citizen trust in elections, or it's just remaining the same or even deteriorating? And how can we help nations to use digital technology to increase trust in elections? I'll start with Scott, and I'll probably have the same question for Ibrahim.
Thank you very much for that question. To me, I think we need to undertake a few things here. One is we need to disaggregate the types of technological systems that we're talking about. At the moment, we tend to use AI as a placeholder for a variety of different types of vending options. and different types of statistical analysis that's taking place in and around elections. So we have things all the way from platforms and how platforms spread information within a public sphere to the type of electronic voting machines that may or may not be adopted in a particular election itself, or the types of transmission and database services that are carrying on the back end. So I think when it comes to questions of trust, we need to look at what type of elements are we talking about trust, and more importantly here, what are we trusting with what element? So, for example, do we trust the platforms to have responsible responsible policies during the electoral process, and is this backed by law? And are there regulators that are going to enforce standards around election times, for example, data regulators or information regulators? That gets back to my previous point about institutions. Or are we talking a little bit about the electronic voting machines that have paper records that can be verified and audited at a later date? So those have different types of things that you're trying to trust within that larger process. To me, the larger unifying principle between all these different elements turns on access to information and access to data, regulations, and laws. This allows civil society actors, scholars, academics, and regulators to be able to intervene and understand better what's going on in the whole information landscape. For example, access to information laws or access to data laws that compel private companies, maybe even multinational private companies, platform companies, to disclose what's going on for content circulated within a country during election time would be incredibly useful to help support trustworthy processes. Otherwise, what we're really doing is we're just having blind trust, and I don't think blind trust is very useful. So simply to recap over here, we need to very much disentangle with our language over here to be much more specific about what elements in the electoral system that we're trusting. But regardless of this or that technology or this or that institution or this or that country, access to data, access to information, laws and regulations are incredibly useful for civil society actors, journalists, academics, regulators to be able to have the mandate and support to be able to go and undertake proactive investigations so that we have a sound basis for trustworthy elections. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass the baton along.
Okay, thank you so much, Scott. And maybe just moving along from what Scott has raised, Ibrahim, you're the one who brought up the word rigging, which is a very common word in elections, not only in Nigeria, but also here in Kenya and other parts of Africa. And I think rigging is what the ordinary citizen talks about when they are concerned about whether an election is trustworthy or not. Maybe you can just tell us, because you gave us a few examples at the state level and at the national level in Nigeria of the use of technology. And maybe, with that context, just answer the part that has technology helped or has it hurt when it has come to people suspecting that elections have been rigged or otherwise? Thank you, Ibrahim.
Thank you, Ma. It's a very difficult question to answer, but it's a very, very good question and a very good point by James, the issue about trust. I think not only in every aspect of policy making, trust is very, very vital to its success. But I would like to look at it in terms of electoral processes and different technologies applied, and then just reflect on the people trust on those issues. Now, take, for example, the earlier example I gave on the electronic voting machine. Obviously, after that election, that local government election, I don't think any state or even at national level have tried to use that electronic voting machine because people no longer trust it, and it exposes a fundamental flaw in the machine that one person can just keep clicking a particular party. The machine won't know, it cannot verify, it will just keep counting and recording. So after that, I think at that level, in terms of voting machine, people are a bit skeptical. Now, in another process in terms of accreditation, since 2011, 2015 that it started, people have like really come to really trust the smart card reader and verification tools. Like we have this one, Viva's recent one, in terms of election, and people trust in terms of does the number of voters, even if there will be problem, if there will be any manipulation, the number of voters in total will not be more than those of accredited during the election. So at that process of accreditation and the machine, people really in Nigeria really trust it. Overall, over the years with improvement and changes, I think particularly in Nigeria, people are beginning to trust the machines, the digital technologies being involved. And even the reason why it is being pushed for, because people are not trusting human involvement in the process. And they think the excessive human involvement in the election is what is causing problems, why they are saying that there is rigging, whether it's true or not. So overall, I think there is that increasing trust. However, it comes with, what do I say, with ambivalence, right? Because permit me to correct the figures I earlier stated I verified about cyber attack in 2023 election. So actually, the electoral management body, the portal, during the, I think, presidential election, it was attacked 3,834,244 times in just one day, in less than 24 hours. And after the whole election process, I think in 2 weeks, the whole government website, particularly the electoral management body, experienced about 12.9 million attacks, cyber attack. So it stalled the process and stopped the whole process of transmission of result in real time. And it shows to the people, to the common people, because most people are not very conversant with technology. Even me that I'm speaking, I'm still learning, and the technology is improving as you get to understand this version or this level. Before you know it, it has moved to another level. As you get familiar with Windows 10, it moves to Windows 11. So it is quite complex, and it exposed to people that this technology is not infallible. It's not it can be tempered. However, I think overall, in Nigeria, I can speak for that. In Nigeria, there is improvement and increasing trust in terms of using digital technology in election process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that people can trust or even overtrust technology rather than people, and I hope this trust is deserved. Now, I'll quickly move to Eliud. As I had said, I have an interest in the aspect, at least, of voter registration, particularly of youth, because they're the group who normally attain their majority of 18 years and they need to register as voters so that they can participate. Now, I think in previous times, there have been allegations of apathy on the part of the youth that they just didn't register, even though the opportunity was there. But now we're seeing they're very keen to register. How do you see technology helping or hindering the desire of youth to participate? And I think that was the first principle or pillar that Scott said, this universal suffrage, that everybody who has the right to vote should vote. But of course, if they're not registered, they're not able to participate. The second thing maybe I'd like you to start touching on is the issue of social media and the way that it polarizes opinions, because most people are able to put themselves into a kind of information bubble. As journalists, how are you seeing that we could improve information in such a way that people are not caught up in a bubble where their existing views are reinforced and they don't have to listen to the other side? So I'll stop there. Please tell us a little bit about those two issues, Elliot.
Thank you so much for those queries. So technology and participation. I would start with where my colleague panelist has left, and it's the issue of trust. What we have seen, and you had mentioned the issue of voter registration, and rigging is a name that has a word that has come up, in the discussion. Now, in Kenya's context, elections are rigged just after, holding the ones that are concluded, and this starts with voter registration, and not just voter, but voter registration. And as you mentioned, this starts with you have to have an ID card for you to register as a voter. Now, Kenya's voting patterns are based on, you could say, tribes, because most of the regions in Kenya, there are certain communities that inhabit certain regions. And now how the rigging process would start is, if, for example, there's an incumbency and they are seeing that they might be unpopular in certain regions, then you hear complaints that we are not able to get our IDs, because that's how it starts. Or the registration of IDs is politicized in a way. For example, in Kenya's case, there's all this debate of whether the amount that, if you actually need to pay to get an ID card, and if you have to pay, how much then are you supposed to pay? So this conversation, or this push and pull continues, and there are certain regions that historically have also been marginalized in access of these IDs. So from that point, you see a voter suppression strategy that starts from as soon as the other election ends. Now, when then on the year of election, there is what we call the mass registration, that is usually in maybe 2 phases, or there's an extension within those 2 phases. How the voter registration, strategy, or the voters registration process, or the infrastructure, or the personnel and the time that is given, and the technology that is deployed to register these voters, is also skewed in a certain way, where possibly where you are popular, then there is more focus or more deployment of staff and the registration kits. In some areas where you think then you are not popular, then, or you're not popular, then there's a limit of that. And now coming to a question is, I think then the Gen Z, who most of them might not have taken their IDs, because we are looking at maybe 2 years' time will be in an election, those who would have qualified to be voters might find that challenge. Those who had the IDs but had not registered then might also have a challenge, because I think there will be an overwhelming interest in voting. So that might overwhelm, even if the game was fair, to quell the situation. Already, we are saying that the Kenyan election, the cost of election was mentioned here. Kenyan election is among the most expensive in Africa. I was looking at the last election was Kenya shillings 45 billion. That's almost $350 million. So that cost then will see a push and tug around that. So the registration of new voters might find that challenge. And your second question is on the social media and how it hinders or allows participation. I think one of the biggest awakening since the Gen Z, and I think Gen Z just amplified that, is Kenyans are very political and very participatory in politics. Everywhere you go in the evening, in a public service vehicle or in a eatery, or the groups we call barazas, which are informal discussions, or what we call the people's parliament, which are held in some parks in Nairobi. People are very participatory in their politics and governance. And social media has, catalyzed that. And we are seeing a lot of canvassing on different platforms. We are seeing politicians actually now holding direct discussions with people. We have seen, for example, if I may, is the former deputy president, who is ideally, a person of age, actually joining TikTok, live to try and engage, with the young people. We have also seen policy government actually going out of its way to react to social media pressure. So I think social media itself and the accessibility of smartphones in Kenya. There's also the internet connectivity in Kenya is fairly better than most of our neighbors. So I think social media actually will propel or intensify participation in political discourse. But this must not be confused, because there's always this wave, feel good wave. Then when the real work is supposed to be done, getting out and vote, becomes a challenge. So the political players and the citizens themselves might actually then have to go to the extra mile and actually participate in the voting itself, not just the discourse. So how then do we as media, ensure that there's no information bubble, or that one side is not also getting access? I think one of the ways that I think media, and I'll give one of the top media houses in the country is called the Royal Media Services, is its deliberate move to get into communities through vernacular radio stations. And in these vernacular radio stations, you will always, or mainly at the weekend morning shows, you always hear, them inviting political players when there is actually electoral officials, when they are in place, or even the secretariat that is in place now had an opportunity to get out and actually speak about elections, politics, and what then that needs to be done, because in Kenya we have the issue of the delayed appointment of the electoral commissioner. So I have witnessed the CEO of the commission coming out and explaining what needs to be done and what will be their priority areas when the commissioner or the commission is in place. So I think different media, and of course mainstream media, has also provided platforms where different players in the political scene or in election preparations have had panel discussions as well. We have explainers as well. An explainer which tries to, for example, what do you need to do so that you can actually go and vote? This might be an obvious thing, but it's not obvious to all people, given where the people are, level of education, and also the level of exposure. So those are some of the ways I think social media, technology, and of course the mainstream media can contribute to the electoral processes.
Thank you very much, Eliud, for giving us quite a bit of enlightenment of how things are in Kenya. For those who are not Kenyan, vernacular means the local languages. We have well, it depends how you define it, but we have between 53 and 80 Kenyan local languages, and the radio stations have been able to transmit in many different languages for civic education and other types of information. So that's what that was about. So please, I've only seen one or two questions in the chat. So in the next 5 minutes or so, I will be allowing our distinguished panelists to respond to your questions. So if you do have a question, please just type it in the chat. I turn to James. And James, I'm thinking about, you talked about the different stages, the pre-election, the actual election, and the post-election. And you also talked about how technology has been successful in at least two of those stages, and perhaps not so successful in the transmission of results. So I'd like to, because I think about this problem, which Eliud has just talked about, where you can deliberately target certain groups and fail to register them so that they do not participate in the election as they should. So the universal suffrage pillar is not achieved deliberately. How do you see technology? I'm just wondering, why should people have to register at all? Maybe just the day you're born as a citizen in the hospital or even at home, why is somebody not registered as a voter? So how do you see the technology of the future making it possible not to carry out activities like voter suppression? And, alongside that, somebody has said in the chat that this just is not practical for Africa, given our infrastructure challenges, our capacity challenges, and other challenges. You are really an expert in this area, and you've participated around the world. Do you really see this as being an insurmountable goal for Africa, or are there ways in which we can leapfrog? Over to you, James.
All right. Thank you for that, Catherine. So this is my opinion, and then more from observing the electionary processes in several places, and then being part of research team evaluating, some of the immediate impact and then the after effect. Now, you're right. There will always be that point whereby a certain group will feel disenfranchised. And then that is without saying. Ultimately, my belief is this, that we get to a point in which, also similar, because for certain reason, Estonia is a perfect model of what works. And it kind of answers the question you pushed. In that at birth, almost everyone, you have some form of digital ID. And then also this digital ID kind of progresses up until the point you can vote. And then also there's no need to start creating a separate voter's ID that can then, which creates like a fault line. The fault line will be this: some group of people might decide to disenfranchise a certain group. But imagine everybody that is born in a country, you already have a digital ID. And that digital ID or a national ID, can then be transformed into a state you can use even during election. I believe that will address that disenfranchisement problem that is being talked about. And something remarkable, and I think it's something that is being pushed by the INEC in Nigeria, is that hopefully, we hope it is not going to also be, because, when with ambitious, take on technology, it also creates what you call a fault line. So the INEC of Nigeria is hoping to be able to use a national ID as against a voter's ID, as a means for participation in election. And I believe it is the right direction. And I think that a lot of countries too should move away from the need for a specialized voter's ID to an ID that whether you're voting or you're paying taxes or you want to buy a house or you want to access mortgage, that ID always works. That way there will be more inclusiveness, and then no one will feel left behind. On the infrastructure challenge, that is without saying, and then the truth is the cost or the financial take, and I like what Eliud mentioned about, I think it was Eliud and then or the previous speaker, about the cost of the election. The truth is this, digital elections are tremendous undertaking. So, but it's going to take a long time for there to be complete infrastructure overhaul. It's going to be, digital old promise, but then we should also kind of manage our expectation. We shouldn't expect technology to solve everything. We should be more open to the hybrid approach. We should allow manual in certain places where the infrastructure is not there. We should allow for storage of vote. Maybe this electronic voting machine, it stores the votes, and then when it gets to a point where you can transmit, then you can effectively transmit. And then when you're in places where infrastructure is there, you are effectively able to transmit in real time. So I believe, because we can't really afford trying to overhaul the entire infrastructure because of election and trust in governance, it is important for us to kind of cut our coats according to what we have. For places where there's infrastructure, use technology to the fullest. For places where it is not there, use a manual approach, and then just stagger it in such a way that you are adaptive. And my take on this is countries that are adaptive in their approach, and I think the US also does this, which is also allowance for mail-in voting. US is not going full-fledged digital, but then it is remarkable that African technology are very ambitious, so an hybrid approach that allows for a whole lot of methods, offline approach, digital approach, where the infrastructure is, I believe that's the way to go.
Thank you very much, James. I would have loved to have another round of questions, but I can see that time is going. There's Mohammed from Somaliland who says he would like to talk about the biometric voter registration. Please do enable Mohammed, but Mohammed, could I limit you to around 5 minutes so that there'll be time for the panelists to prepare the final round of comments. And please, panelists, as you prepare your final round, please scan the chat to see if there's anything there that you can address. And then I will try to round up in good time, which will be in about 15 minutes time. So Mohammed, please go ahead and tell us what Somaliland has been doing. And as I said, I'd really appreciate brevity.
Okay, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with you a very small, experience about Somaliland and electronic elections. Actually, Somaliland has adopted a biometric voter registration system in 2016-2017, and that biometric voter registration system has been successful and has enhanced credibility of Somaliland elections. Actually, the presidential election in 2017, Somaliland piloted a biometric voter registration system and with the support from international donors. The elections in 2021, and particularly the local elections, Somaliland again deployed biometric verification registration system, though the technical and logistical challenges arose, including delays in the voter card distributions. And this is, one of the challenges that are still existing. And 2024, the recent presidential elections actually used it also biometric verification, but not biometric and voting system, because the technical capacity of the Somaliland National Electoral Commission was not up to that level to use electronic election directly. Actually, this system has actually reduced the double voting, because Somaliland elections have been actually practicing since its establishment. But there has been, frauds in the ballot elections because of the double voting. But biometric registration system actually prevented the duplicate or double voting. And last election, actually, it has been observed that, biometric voter verification system by using scanners at the polling stations has significant reduced, and double voting or other fraud related to election and ballot papers or ballot stations. But there has been a lot of challenges, technical challenges issue like, power outage, it used to happen, and the internet connectivity problems, because, the connectivity is a problem in many African countries, and this, and happening in Somalia too. So some of the equipments, malfunction, and the technical capacity to troubleshoot was either very expensive or not available, and that actually could delay some of the polling stations in Somaliland. But actually, this system has enhanced public trust and reduced political disputes over the election and results, and made more transparent. So the other thing I would like to mention is that there has been some security concerns related to data security concerns. Risk of hacking or misuse of the biometric data was more likely to happen. And in this case, Somaliland also does not have data protection in place. And then we were able to see some of the results of the elections that have been published or posted in the social media, and some of the people who have been, their pictures posted by the social media and other fake information that has been demonstrated and that has been circulating in the social media. So this is a short experience of Somaliland, biometric and elections. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about that.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Actually, that gives us a lot of hope. And just combined with James' remarks, there are parts of the process that can be successfully implemented, even in countries that don't have, a lot of technical or other resources. So thank you for that, Mohammed.
You're welcome.
Now, we're just going into our final round, and I'd ask each panelist to tell us what they see as the future of technology in elections, either at the pre-phase or in the actual administration of elections or following elections. And what can Africa do, since we've been asked to have a reality check that this is quite a challenging undertaking, very expensive. But of course, nothing is more expensive than post-election violence, as we have seen in several countries, including Kenya. So yes, the price tag is huge, but if it can help people have faith in leadership and not fight and kill each other after elections, then it is invaluable. So the last round of questions, I can see there's some new comments in the chat. So please have a look and just address anything there that has touched you. And I trust we'll have more chats like this. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to be a panelist in future or who would like to suggest a topic, please do contact us through the Diplo portal. There's an Africa page where you can get in touch and tell us. You can also see previous panels. We've had about, I think, 5 in the past. So you can watch those and you can see the discussions that have been there. But we're always very keen to get suggestions from our colleagues around Africa about what they would like to talk about and what they'd like to see. So I'll start the other way from how we started. So James, you have the honor of being the first person to tell us what your parting shot is.
Thank you for that, Catherine. So mine will be this. We should continue to be ambitious with use of digital technology. We should not be afraid. We should not be afraid of trying them. Because of the scale, we should also expect lapses and failure here and there, which represent points we can learn from and then build on. Because ultimately, it is the only way towards we building a society in which we have tremendous trust in our governance processes. I do not see like an alternative. We have to keep using them. We have to keep experimenting. We have to also continue to be ambitious. Thank you.
Thank you for that short and sweet rejoinder, James. Now I'll turn to Elliot with the same issue. What is your parting shot? What do you advise us for the future?
Yeah. Thank you. So I think we have to be realistic. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who visited just a country, one of the countries in Africa, and I was surprised that they don't even have a proper tax collection system, and secondly, a pension system. And I think this is reflected in very many other countries. And of course, as I mentioned, what we need first are the systems. Other systems have to work. Other governance systems have to work. And with that, then you build on the trust, and trust and confidence in the systems. Kenya has tried. And in 2007, we had instances where returning officers, would disappear with the results from the polling station. People would disappear with the ballot boxes, but now that has increasingly changed, where now the electoral transmission of the result has a backup or is seen as the more trustworthy process. But still, we are seeing politicians still going to the courts and petitioning the processes. We saw that in 2017 in Kenya, when there was an nullification of the election, and the courts were very clear that it is the process was more important than the results. How do you end up with the results? And now that takes me to the last point: is the use of technology comes with other disadvantages, and these are equipment that are vulnerable to abuse, manipulation by people, and of course theft. And these will likely result in erroneous results. And we have also seen issues of payment processes which have turned out corrupt, making a big cash out of these processes. So I think my parting shot will be: first, we need to put our governance systems in place first, so that we build on them. Secondly, we need to build the infrastructure. I think how much access of power do our countries have in Africa? How much access to internet do our countries have in Africa? And how open space and information do the voters and the electronic have? So I think some of these are the things that we have to start from, but it is not to discourage other administrations from getting into it. But I think for it to have people's confidence and trust, it has to have a very firm foundation. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. And now I'll just quickly turn to Scott. Please give us your parting shot.
Yes, thank you very much to the other panelists for raising some very important matters. And also thank you very much for your very excellent moderation over here. If anyone wishes to reach out and contact me, they can look me up at Research ICT Africa. My profile is there, and I'm more than happy to converse about these and other matters. I think we need to be very circumspect about what we mean by AI in elections, We need to disentangle, because words can sometimes be a little bit too loaded, and the goods in one area may, in fact, overlook the bads in another area. To me, elections and election integrity is too vital a matter, particularly given Africa's experiences where we have democracy or elections without democracy. We have leaders for life. We have competitive authoritarian regimes, to use a technical political science language. The stakes are simply too high to use our elections as experimentation grounds. Our key criteria for success over here should be to what extent can technology reinforce the principles that we care most deeply about universal franchise, public participation, so on and so forth. When we are looking at elections and technology, we must understand that this is a political process first, not a technological process. If we see this as a realm, if we are technologically centric over here, if we are only looking at the technology, we're actually maybe going to create more problems for us than the ones we hope to solve. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass it back.
Thank you, Scott. And now I'll turn to Ibrahim. You had the first word. Now you're going to have almost the last word. Tell us, what is your parting shot after this discussion?
What an honor. So before that, I saw there was a question addressed to me by John Paul about what happened, how did the electoral management body in Nigeria manage the issue about cyber attack and transmission in the 2023 election. Simply said, we resorted to the manual or the old ways, whereby the result was transmitted from the ballot, from the polling unit to the ward, local government, state to the national level. Actually, that process was like the traditional process was the basis was there. The transmission in real time was just a kind of a support, a kind of a check, and it kind of failed more or less. And my own take about the future of technology in election in Nigeria is that yes, there is a future. We will see more digital technology introduced in many of the elections across Africa. But however, we have to, I think the key takeaway is that we have to put in mind whatever technology or choice we are going to make, the goal is to build trust, really. We have to build trust, the system. The election last year of Senegal is a very, very manual election, but you can see that people really trust the system. The election in India is not completely digitalized, but you can see also the people trust the system. Let's take India, for example. How did they trust? How did they build that trust system? Is that they domesticated the technology. And how did they domesticated the technology? Is they consider the environment. When they look at the environment, they look at the people, the infrastructure, and the culture of the people, and even the process. They look at that. So in developing their own technology, it's not very sophisticated technology. It's almost a huge machine, a very huge machine a box that they carry around. But it makes sure of certain things. One, each bot counts. Second, you cannot bot twice. So the Indians kind of emphasize on that button. Each bot counts, and you cannot bot twice. And they take their time to conduct the election. It takes like 1 month or 2 months to conduct the election in India. In countries like Nigeria, in 48 hours, 72 hours, you will hear the result. So context is very, very important in terms of the choices we make. And we are kind of ambitious. I quite agree with James. Sometimes we may not need to be, we should be ambitious, but we should follow our ambition in terms of step by step. There are many processes to elections. We can start with digitalizing the registration of political parties. We can start with develop website for electoral management bodies. We can go on to accreditation, then to even voting, then to transmission, We can take step by step, and it takes time. We have to be patient with the system, and the technology is not completely perfect. There's no perfect technology. It has to be improved, but it has to suit the context and the environment and the processes that we operate on. So that's my own take. Thank you.
So the time has drawn to a close. I'm sorry we started 3 minutes late and now we're 3 minutes over time. So I hope you'll just bear with me as I say goodbye. So my duty, first of all, is to really thank our panelists, Ibrahim, Scott, James, Elliot. I think we've really benefited. And I'm so proud that all our panelists, as most of our webinars, the vast majority of our panelists are from Africa. And we're very, very proud of that because you can see that Africans know a lot and they can contribute a lot. So thank you for being with us today and sharing your knowledge. I'll also add Mohammed from Somaliland for also sharing your knowledge with us. Secondly, I'd say we have a lot to learn from each other. I wish we could have more panels like this after every election so that no country in Africa repeats the mistake of any other country. We are able to learn from one another and each country to do better than the last, because we really don't have the resources to waste in making the same mistakes over and over again. The second thing that I wanted to say just in closing is there's hope. We've seen that even though there are all these infrastructure, connectivity, and other problems, yes, we've had some success, especially at the pre-election stage. So we're very, very encouraged by what you've shared today for different countries, Nigeria, Somaliland, Kenya, South Africa, many countries around have at least been able to use digital technology in some part of the electoral process with quite a degree of success. The last lesson is, of course, there are things that must be done, and some of these things are expensive, and I'll just link that with my first comment that please let's learn from one another. And in that spirit, we do hold these webinars through the DiploFoundation quarterly. So please continue to make your suggestions about the technology and diplomacy issues that we need to discuss. And please encourage your friends to join. We had the smallest audience we've ever had today. And I'm disappointed because I think this is one of the richest discussions we've had. So next time, please join. If you are a panelist, you can always join, and we'll continue to invite you. And please invite your friends to join so that we have rich discussions and we learn from one another. So I'll just ask Mwende to say the final words and then we can close. But thank you very, very much to all the participants and to all the panelists, and to Arvin, the technical team from DiploFoundation. Thank you so much. I hand over to Mwende.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gitau. It has been a very enriched discussion that we have had. We thank you, all our panelists, for your contribution. I'll not add many more, but I think we need to continue with the discussion that we have had so far, because there are indeed issues that are arising that we can put our minds to, and we can bring value from our experiences to those processes. So thank you so much, everyone. We are willing to invite you again, and we'll invite you for the next webinar, which will be in September. And we'll be just discussing the Global Digital Compact. So we invite you all to join us in September. And in the meantime, just head to our Diplo website and the African page and give your comments and interaction so that we can learn from each other. So thank you so much, and have a very good evening, morning, and afternoon. Thank you.